Welcome, everyone. This is our first Digital Dawn podcast. Today, we've got Robbie Fikes. He's worked with me a bunch of times on crazy digital experiences, and I wanted to get his take on where things are going with creative coding world, what is he doing, and how he sees the future going. So, Robbie, let's jump in with a little bit of an introduction. I know what you do, but I don't think our audience knows what you do yet.
Okay. Well, I do a lot of things. That's a very vague question. I know you're talking about work stuff, but what I do for work, I also consider a hobby that turned into work. Essentially, I guess that's how it started.
Yeah.
All right. How far are we talking back? I could go all the way to high school or what I'm doing now.
How about actually, let's go back to signal to noise. Do you remember that? That was a minute ago, but I feel like that was, for me, the first time I was introduced to what you do. And I think actually, at least for me, that was a jumping off point. And I would imagine for you, it was also a jumping off point because it's kind of like, was like, oh, wait, creative coding. You mean I don't just have to like write databases?
Got it. Okay. So for those who don't know, when I met Michael, he was at a signal to noise meetup, which I also attended. It was ran by Jeff Merkel.
Yeah. Shout out to Jeff Merkel.
Yeah. Really cool for setting that up. So when I met Michael, he was on his laptop. I just like sat in the middle of the table and then he was right next to me. There's also another guy who was making dubstep. Really cool music. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
But Michael was like, he had an Arduino and he was working with, I think it was V4, VVV or something.
Yeah,
some kind of node-based
man, I forgot
system.
about that.
Yeah. Using this like micro sensors. I forgot what kind of sensors was on it, but it was detecting the rotation. And it translated geometry. It translated the geometry on the program you wrote. So that was the first time I met Michael. Yeah, when I saw it, I thought that was really cool because I do something similar to that. I just don't know the technologies exactly what he's using, but I can see where it's getting at.
Man, and VVVV or V4, I don't even know what they call it anymore, but that was a minute ago. That was a long time ago. And for the people who are for the people who are watching this that don't know, VVVV is a software package. Basically, it's a programming language, kind of, but rather than writing code, you connect functions to each other via like wire connections. And that was my intro. Like that was, honestly, that was, as an artist, that was my entrance into coding, because it was more accessible to me. It was visual. So yeah, that was a minute ago. And I feel like that sort of idea of tech as art is actually kind of a central vein that we have been playing with for quite some time. I remember like you showed me one of these projects that you did a minute ago that was like the light up clouds for I think the music venue. Can you talk a little bit more about kind of what you did to create that?
Yeah, so what I did to create that.
Yeah, like what was sort of the back end of what you were doing?
Okay. Well, first let's explain to everyone what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, back in 2017, right out of school, my second freelance project, I was approached by a project manager at Club Vinyl here in Denver. And she saw my artwork that I was presenting at CU Denver. She thought that was really cool. And she had said like, oh, could you make an art installation for New Year's party? Essentially. So I say yes, okay. And I did that. And I worked with 3 other people. And we pretty much did a whole bunch of LED lights throughout the whole club, and the club was actually 4 floors. We did 3 of the floors for lighting and LED work, and fabrication and clouds, and wow, it was pretty cool.
Do you remember? Do you remember what surfaces you were using to code in those?
No, so there was, well, Arduinos starting off. Yeah, because I guess that's, yeah. So those are really cool.
Dude, Arduino's like the gateway drug of coding, because you get to like actually learn what code is doing, and then you get to physically see what it's doing, which I think is a little different than like just like software coding.
It's kind of like if no one has ever, if you haven't, I'm speaking to the audience right now. Audience, if you haven't coded before, I explain it more like if you played with Legos, it's kind of building your own world, essentially. You create your own world. And with coding, it's just adding more. It helps you, it makes you build, it helps you to build that world with the computer. And computers are really powerful calculators, essentially. Like it makes your thinking more enhanced. You could scale it so much more than you can without a computer. You know?
Yeah. Well, I kind of also wanted to chat not just about code, because I think you have a really unique take and sort of position, because you also do a bunch of animations. And I think that I've noticed that because you have sort of a coding context and you have a lot of experience with animation, the stuff that you do, Robbie, is really unique. So I kind of wanted to ask, like, how do you approach animation? Do you come at it like right off the bat, like, oh, I know I can do this with keyframes, or are you always kind of thinking like, is there a more optimized and maybe procedural way to get at these animations?
Both, but I wouldn't say just both. It really depends on what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. What are you looking for when you're trying to make a decision?
Speed, in a sense that I want to create it in a way where it's done very fast. It doesn't, you don't have to try that much. It's kind of intuitive, in speed, you just think and it happens. But also balancing, there's 3 dimensions. So speed, balancing how good it looks, so that competitive aspect, and then as well as, is it the best way to solve this problem? Because if you run into speed, you might do it too fast, but it's not the best way because you didn't put enough time.
Yeah.
And then you have to also think about art. So how much time do you think about spending about solving the problem, and how much time do you spend thinking about designing art?
Totally. Was there a time that you felt like, was there something that you remember recently where you're like, oh, I nailed it. I got that equal trifecta. So the other day I was looking at some of the things that we've done. And actually I was chatting with some of the people at the dam about the alpha and omega thing. And I kind of wanted to take a chance to talk with you on sort of your perspectives and major takeaways from that project.
So you want, so to explain how I see what Michael was trying to get at, was he saw it as an opportunity. First, as a Denver Art Museum, come on. But he's really pushing the artistic expression of this medium that we're playing, called technology, and using computers and hardware and digital elements. We're trying to get more physical elements in it too, because it's fun just playing around with tactile things. I'm sorry, but what was the question again?
Oh, it's all good. Well, I'll be a little more directed because there was a time when we chatted about that animation that was in the middle of the Ouroboros. And I was like, okay, this is what the symbol is about. And then you animated it knowing sort of what I was trying to express to you, what the
Oh
symbolism
yeah,
was.
yeah. Mhm.
And I thought that that was really cool because I think that that's a nuance. That's one of those little things where like I couldn't have done that, you know, but you were able to translate like this concept and this symbol into like a moving animated thing. And so I don't know, I was kind of curious to see like when you're creating your animations, do you have those sort of thoughts where you're like, oh, like how can I make this animation read the way I want it to?
Uh, by putting, it's kind of cheesy to say, but putting myself in the animation, like if I was an animation, how would I want to move and make people react?
No, that's awesome. I
That's
love
that's a
that.
symbolic way of saying it. To break that down more, though, I just follow a lot of animations myself, and what you designed, I've seen a design similar to that and an animation that was with that design. And I'm talking about the dots and like these, it aligns on a grid and spins around and rotates. Uh, so I wanted to apply that same style to your design and animate it how I think it would feel.
I mean, I still to this day, Robbie, think that that's one of the coolest animations I've seen. I
I'm
love,
proud of it too.
dude, I love that animation. I'm like, it's I don't know if you've noticed, but it's like showed up multiple times in our projects because I'm just like, dude, it's legit. It's super legit. I also wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit more about the art piece that you did for the lights out lights on with the heartbeat. That was super cool. And if I remember correctly, you pulled it off in a really short amount of time. So I wanted to give you a chance to kind of talk about that, like your process. What were your thoughts? What, how did you think your idea came out with the interaction?
Uh, well, it's a sacrifice to get to that level, to the point where I was starting to suffer physically. I didn't tell you this or many people, but like I felt like fainting after I installed. It's just moving all those equipment around back and forth, driving a lot, um, and that's on top of doing what I had at Hovercraft, my job there, um, working about around 8, usually 9 hours a day. So after I finish work, I'll come back, try to eat, and then work on art and do that. What was it installed over 2 days, one day?
Yeah, that was a fast turnaround.
Yeah, it was tough, but so what I was able to do was still kind of follow my, I don't know, I guess you call it art practice. What I mean by that is when I do things that are considered art, it's usually me just trying to experiment with new ideas. Not really thinking it's art, but trying to make it look really cool as I can. And hopefully it'll be considered art, but that's what I like doing.
Yeah. Well, and two, like I think that's something I'd be curious to get your take on. Why do you think programmers have this culture that's like I program till I pass out? You know? Is it like
Well, no, I argue and say that that could happen to pretty much every profession,
it's
or at
true.
least most. I don't know many professions that you can not do that in.
So what keeps you coming back to art? Because I think that like I keep seeing that you have these very professional skills that you're always developing, and you're applying them to these professional settings. But it seems to me through other conversations that it's not the same if it's not creative, right? It's not the same if you're not using your skills for something that you feel like is artistic and creative. So what is that? Can you tell me a little bit more about what's going on there?
Yeah, it's also a balance. I mean, that's pretty much most things in life. It's just balancing a lifestyle that can support itself, if that makes sense. And to explain further is
Yes, seriously.
it's really hard to make a living off art, but how I see it is it's just a skill set, really, and it depends how you want to use your skills. Um, you could use it as an expression of art, or you could apply it to making money. Um, and if you only do art, it's hard to make money off of that. So you gotta. I always try to find the balance of using my skill set for not only art but to make a lot of money.
Yep. Yeah, well, and I think that that's something that's really interesting as well. Is like that's something I've been kind of noticing is with digital artists, if you're really good at doing digital art, like digital assets, you're good at whatever it is, 3D, you tend to get jobs. And I think it's interesting, and that's kind of why I wonder if there's not as many digital artists because there's such a job market out there for it, and that's kind of something I've always been curious. I don't know if that's what it is, but it's kind of something I've always wondered, where I feel like digital artists are always kind of doing digital art on the side because they're you know and that's probably with honestly that's with a lot of artists. But I was kind of curious to see if if you've seen that similar thing, because you've been in the professional field doing creative stuff for quite some time. And so I was kind of curious, do you see similar things?
Similar things to what again? Just
Like the people in the digital arts fields are always kind of in this one leg in the professional world and then one leg in the art world, and they're always kind of wanting to do art but also having to do the professional stuff as well.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of what I thought. I've seen that a lot with other people that I know that are in a similar boat, who are really good at what they do. And so I mean, they're getting professional jobs for it. And then that's kind of what's taking their time, and there's not as much room for art. Um, so I thought that was interesting. I was curious to see if you've seen the same thing.
It isn't common though, I'd say.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of the amount of people doing it, there's more people, working in restaurants than there are digital artists.
Yeah.
And to explain to that, and I guess the reasoning is, I guess it's just, people's paths in life. Um, it's not for everyone. It's really hard to do
Yeah.
because you have to do a lot of hard work and sacrifices if you want to be truly successful. I mean, you can pass by and not try that hard and be okay if you don't mind, just do on the side and create art because you like, make t-shirts, print it out, sell it if you want.
Yep.
That kind of thing. You don't have to push to like, the super high end movie status, AAA, because that's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
You can get there if you try, but yeah, again, it's just finding that balance of what you like and what you don't like.
Yep. So I wanted to talk a little bit also about Astral Droid. This is kind of something we've been chatting about for quite some time. It's taken a bunch of different forms. One of the forms that it took was the understudy. We did the Are You Compatible campaign. And that kind of launched sort of this idea of potentially using websites as an interaction point. Um, you've also showed, I don't know how much you can talk about, but you've also showed our team some interactive websites that you've been working on. So I wanted to hear your perspective on sort of why websites are getting more interactive, and do you see a place for a place for artists when it comes to interactive web design?
Of course. I mean, there's already artists that
Yeah,
is interactive art on the web. Tons of galleries to see. Just experimentations, which you can do, creative expressions. CodePen.com
CodePen.
is a gallery site of people just sketching out, ideas, or maybe just trying to figure out some web problems and post solutions that they want. Um, it's a pretty cool one. Openprocessing.org. It's another
Cool.
one. More artsy, but not too many professional artwork on there. More just experimental.
Yeah. And I think that that's what it takes, right? Like kind of what you mentioned earlier. I think those the experimental stuff I think is kind of like the studies, right? You have to go through those sketches, you have to go through those studies, and you have a bunch of different studies that help you get to the done paintings. And I've kind of noticed that same sort of pattern happens with what we do as well. And in a way I kind of view our um our Are You Compatible campaign as one of those sketches,
Mm-hmm.
because we kind of used that sort of framework and idea in this idea that the website is more of a portal, and an access point for an adventure game. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I wanted to hear your take on that, because that was a while ago. I don't know if you've spent much time thinking about it, because we do projects so fast that like there's not a lot of time to think about it. So I was kind of interested to see like what you thought about that project, and if there were any sort of major takeaways that you gained from that.
Major takeaway is can confirm video games are really hard to make. Like you're talking about art as a form of life, right? Just putting your life into making art. Now putting your life into making video games is wow, it's a grind to
It's
get
a
through it.
grind.
But if you get through it, it turns out pretty cool and fun.
Yeah. Well, then in that case, let's segue into this dot truth, dude, because that I think we both can agree was intense. We did this in a month and a half, which is crazy. Most games take months, even years sometimes. So what we were able to do was pretty intense. Um, and I wanted to hear what you thought about that, because that was a really um, expedited timeline.
I'm still processing it. Too soon for me to reflect back on it.
Yeah.
'Cause technically, we're still thinking about it in
Oh
the
yeah.
process. You
Yeah.
know, it's not there yet, but it's still a lot to get you through and waiting for more.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So you're asking like, what do I think about it?
Yeah. Like what did you pull from this? Like if this experience was a tool for things in the future, what do you think you pulled from this?
Well, I wouldn't say pulled. We're in the process, but I feel like I'm pulling knowledge about, just well, first how to build it. But second is more of a, I guess, spiritual, thing. Just reflecting on how much is too much for
Yeah.
starters,
Yeah.
or just really just also trying to find again that balance of time. Time was a real hard one for this. It took a lot. Um,
Yeah, it did. It was intense. That was fun when we like looked at we were using GitHub, and we looked at our graphs about all this stuff. I wish I could remember how many lines of code that we had, but it was something insane. And it was just like, just thinking about it, right? Putting that into perspective, like how much went into that in such a short time frame was really impressive. It was really impressive. And I'm really proud of our team. Um, and I'm excited to talk to Bucks. So Ryan Buxton is another member on our team, and I'll be chatting with him actually in the next podcast. Um, and so yeah, it was crazy. I'm, I'm pretty surprised actually. There were definitely times where I was a little bit nervous on that one. So, what do you think about the fact that we're trying to tie in all these different interactions like web, mobile, and real world? Do you what do you think about that?
well, I am thinking more like hoping that this type of interactions between all your devices, not just staying in one device, uh, catches on and becomes more popular in the future. Uh, I think it's really good to know technology. Otherwise, you're going to have to ask other people to do your technology for you,
Yeah.
which could be annoying for some people, or uh, it's time consuming. But it's not for everyone.
Yeah, and I've really noticed that it's quite like we're getting to the point where specialization is such an important attribute, but at the same time you need sort of like this wider perspective of technology. um and I think that that's actually something that I was really excited about our team, is that we all are super specialized, but we all actually kind of share an interesting sort of subcontext layer for each other's parts, and how those fit in. And I thought that that was really interesting, especially too, because like the idea of collaborative art um, really changes when it comes to things like this, because in a way we really have to like pull from each other's experiences. It really reminds me of athletic teams. You know what I mean? Where like each person plays their position, you know what I mean? But like you have to know that you're the person playing their position is going to do their position, so that like if the ball gets passed to you, you can do what you need to do and then pass the ball to your teammate. And I think that that's an interesting type of atmosphere that's created with these sort of projects, that's very different from the other sort of collaborative art projects that I've been on. I kind of also wanted to talk to you about like UX and UI.
Hmm.
I think UX and UI is really interesting, especially because like art in the sense of art is supposed to have, intention, and there's purpose as far as a message being conveyed. And it's meant to make a connection with the person viewing it. Um, and I think that's really interesting when it relates to UX and UI, because, you like a user interface is meant to make a connection with the user so that they feel like it's something they can relate to and use. And I wanted to find out more about what goes on in your head when you're designing a user interface. What are you thinking when trying to make sure that this thing is connecting with someone and is usable?
Well, before thinking about other people's, I have to think about myself. What I mean is thinking how I would like to have an interface that I could use to solve the problem. That could be figuring out how to get people to sign in with an email and password. I know that in order to do that, you have to have, start dealing with data and store that somehow, right? And Buxton was really cool enough to create a whole backend system.
Yeah.
He built an API and MySQL databases, and man, there's a lot. I think that's where you're saying the trifecta of a balance of our skill sets really came into play. It saved me a lot of time from trying to figure out how to do all that. I knew of it, but I haven't really done too much of making my own. So I could just focus on animating, and then when the time came, implementing my animations through code and hooking it into Buxton's code.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I think the fact that we were collaborating on so many different levels, like, and levels I like literally mean like from the code to the way it looks. We were in conversation the whole time, sort of collaborating about what was happening on each level. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, actually, one of the things that I found most interesting, which was also probably one of the most scary things, but when we were trying to merge things on GitHub, you know what I mean? And like we were going through the scripts and like saying, okay, you did this chunk of code, I did this chunk of code, which one do we merge? That was a really interesting process, that I don't know, I felt was kind of like I don't know. It was interesting to see the back end of that being so like flexible. It was kind of cool because it reminds me kind of like underpaintings. When you're doing underpaintings, you're sort of creating this sub layer that is going to sort of push out the detail.
What do you mean by underpainting?
So like with painting, when you're doing like especially oils and you want all the depth of the color to come out, you do paintings underneath the painting that you put on top, so that what is in the background or what is the underpainting sort of soaks through and it basically sort of penetrates through the top layers of the paint and is seen at the front. Which to me reminds me so much of that stuff that we're doing with code, because it really is kind of this underpainting. It's like you don't really see the code, but you're informed about what's happening when you know that there's code there. And I always thought that was an interesting connection. So I remember when I got to see your senior thesis project in Redline a while ago. And I wanted to give you a chance to talk about that, because I think it has a lot of really cool implications. So tell us a little bit more about that project.
Yeah, sure. At CU Denver, I studied digital design, and I wanted to do something that was more than just design work, mainly because what I've been doing for my artistic expression, exploring all these different fields besides using Photoshop and, the Adobe products, Sketch as well, but design tools, I wanted to use development tools as well. And I learned that Unity 3D was a really cool tool where you can merge both design assets and program at the same time. So it made your essentially designs and art be controllable with your imagination.
Yeah, it was really cool. And if I remember correctly, you had set up a system so that people could experience the same sort of game on two different platforms. You had someone in virtual reality, and then you had someone on the iPad. and they were actually able to sort of play off of each other while experiencing two different ways to access the media. Could you talk a little bit more about why you decided to do that?
Because I felt like there was very few people in the world who've ever done that, especially to the scale of what I've done. I've only seen one example, and it was just one iPad, so I decided to scale it to four. But I just saw that use of technology was just really fascinating. I mean, think about it. Like, say you take your TV remote control and you can use it to control any single device in your house, right?
Yeah.
It felt like that, being able to get technological devices, with computers in them to talk to each other. And I can now, because they talk to each other, they also talk to me. So I'm talking with these devices of what I wanted to do. And
Yeah.
I think that's really fun to play with.
And that's something that I always find super curious. Like, what do you think the future is going to be like with people and technology? It's clear that we have some sort of possibly innate connection with it. Where do you think that's going to go?
It's going to get closer and closer together. And the newest advances, I think, is really machine learning. I'd say it's going to be the future. It is the future. It's already happening. That is right now where the peak of all this is going. And because of that, it's getting to the point where we can just think it and it'll happen.
It's pretty crazy. We'll just be making art by thinking about it. That'd be cool. I would be perfectly okay with a Photoshop, but my mind's eye. Could you imagine when Unreal Engine gets a plugin for that, and you're just like, oh, here's this environment and world. Boop, there it is. Thanks, Neuralink.
That's what I'm basing it off of. But even not even that. Like, we have right now, we can write code to kind of predict how we think people are going to act. I don't know if you've seen. I just recently saw this documentary it's called AlphaGo. People who play Go, and there's a team by Google who made a computer machine that beat the best player in the world 4 times out of 5.
Yeah. Yep.
Getting there.
It's pretty wild. I'm excited for that. I think that once we figure out a way to really connect and sort of join it, I think that there's a really interesting possibility for some sort of human progression. I mean, look at how crazy close we've been with technology throughout history. We just, and the thing is it actually helps us in most cases. Of course, sometimes there's issues with it, but I mean, like, for instance, when we started using technology to create agriculture, like, what we were able to do afterwards, because we didn't have to worry so much about getting our food, we did amazing things. That was like a genesis for the human species, or at least the cultures that were using that agriculture at the time, which is wild. Do you think that what about VR? What do you think about VR? Because I think that I've had enough experience with it that I think it's pretty wild. But I think there's always sort of this looming question in the industries about what will happen with it. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think it would try to go in a direction where most people would want it to happen, which is to the point where you can even be contact lenses you put on. But I wouldn't wear contact lenses because I think they would feel annoying after a while. But maybe they can make it really comfortable. But say they did that and they did make it really comfortable and you couldn't even feel it, right? and it somehow being refracted light. They were able to make chips so small that you couldn't even see it. It's see-through, right? Now imagine if they were able to do that and augment every single thing. You know how great AI is already, right? Apply that on top of your contact lenses that is like translating these sources of light to, whatever you want, right? That's what I would want to happen.
I feel like we're going to need a RAM update, and we're going to need extra RAM for that so that we can actually process all that data and store it to our already not so big hard drive. That's funny.
But if it gets to that point, imagine they get to that point. I bet they can also get to the point where they could attach other electronic devices even throughout your bloodstream, right? To monitor you, to, modulate your body so you don't even have to worry about your health. The computer does it for you. Right?
It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I think you could get there. 50
Eventually.
years? Probably.
Yeah. I also wanted to chat with you about your night lights project. The other, it was last season, right? Last winter, you did a night lights project. And I wanted to hear a little bit more about what you did. What was your process? How did you go about that?
So what I did was I wanted to do a really cool illusion on this giant building. This giant is huge. This is probably the tallest building. Well, okay, it's not what it stands out in downtown Denver. It's so cool. And I was able to create an illusion where it looked like the whole building was spinning.
Yeah.
And I saw it as my chance to show a magic trick, visually to people on the street. It's free entertainment. So
Totally.
as long as they're passing by, at least they could get a glimpse to say, wow, that was really cool.
Totally. And like, this sounds a little silly, but like, in a way, I kind of feel like the things that we do is kind of like contemporary magic. You know what I mean? Like, we use technology to like create these illusions and these sort of like connections, and I kind of feel like sometimes we're magicians.
I used to do magic tricks when I was a kid.
What, Robbie? I didn't know that about you. Dude. Yeah. That's what it is then. We're contemporary technology magicians. I love it. And for the viewers that don't know, the Night Lights project is a project that the Denver Theater District is a part of, where they projection map onto a tall building in Denver called the Daniels and Fisher Building. And actually, I'll be having David Moak on this podcast, and he does a lot with the Denver Theater District and has a helping hand in the Night Lights project. But yeah, that was crazy. I don't know. I think that surface is going to be a really cool thing that we have here in Denver. Mm-hmm. I mean, the template is super intuitive. Like, the way that they have it set up, like, as a digital artist, you can really do a lot with that. One thing I wanted to ask you though, you've also done a lot of projection mapping stuff. What are you thinking about when projection mapping to get that edge?
If in terms of design, I'm thinking about the form and how can I use light to play with its form? Could I try to create an illusion? Could I add some particle effects and make it, how does light reflect and shine back to you? Is it super bright, brightness or color? Just form first, right? And then the second part is function. What am I trying to say with this light, on the surface?
Totally.
Like, does it mean something? Is it trying to accomplish something?
Absolutely. And funny enough, I actually think that if it wasn't for light, I don't think we would have the ability to interpret form. You know what I mean? Like the fact that like when you have a shape, right? This little shape, the reason we know that it's a cube is because on one side it's lighter than the other, right? And because of that light and the change in the value of the light over the surface, that gives us a way to interpret and identify and classify that surface. And it's really interesting to me. I've always kind of thought that light is the reason we have, not is, but is what allows us to inform our perception of form. And I just always thought that was interesting. I thought it was cool that you brought up light. So that's actually something I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit further, especially since right now we're in the lights exhibition at the museum. And like all of our art uses light, maybe not all of it, but like the fact that we use screens and the fact that we use projection surfaces and the fact that we use LEDs, like that's all light. So can you talk a little bit more about what were you thinking about with light in mind when you did the projection map on the DNF tower?
Well, first I was just thinking about color. And it took me several tries to get the color right because I've played with projectors before. I knew that color on different surfaces will reflect their brightness a certain way, right? So for example, if I was to take my projector and shine it on this white wall, it would be pretty bright coming back. Looking at the building, I saw that it was brown. And because it's brown, it would look a bit darker. And it was also kind of this stone rough material. So the light wouldn't really bounce as much off of that. So on the second round, I boosted up the brightness and aimed for really strong colors to play with that. The other was, I saw it more of an opportunity to experiment with new software. And I was trying to aim at Houdini. I did learn Houdini along the way, but I did not end up using it in the final piece.
Houdini is a beast.
You could do a lot. It's just, I couldn't learn it in just 2 weeks to pull something off that large.
Man, I've done some rigid body dynamics in Houdini and done some soft body dynamics in there, but it gets deep so fast, man.
But that is one tool I'd like to get better at. The reason being is when you create these simulations, they can be exported and imported into other software. So I would think about, importing it into websites or into real-time engines like Unity and Unreal.
Yeah. Isn't it weird that they simulate things in the way that they do? I don't know. After playing around with a lot of physics simulations, it starts to make me think a little bit more about like what's going on out here in this reality. You know what I mean? Like being able to send out this node and register its position at every point in time, and then to be able to send feedback just to one point. It's insane. It's really cool to me.
Yeah, I was just thinking if we could use that in VR and you overlay that to the real world. First, you map the real world, right? And then you use simulations to put content in the real world.
Totally. Yeah, there was I saw the other day actually there's a plugin that Unreal Engine has for point cloud data, which is really interesting. I kind of wanted to explore that, like scan a space and then go into that space in the point cloud and possibly be able to interact with the point cloud. Be interesting. There's a whole bunch of things, but yeah, dude, once you get into those shaders.
What about your development for this .truth 2 or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, dude. So Ashley and I, Ashley Frazier, and I have been working on the second version, and we're calling it Soul Recursion. Dawn is back at it again because she's determined to find her father. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I'm going to
How?
give you right now.
No, that's no.
It's enough to get you excited. But yeah, we'll be using Unreal for this one. Um, we're
Are you still aiming to use websites with Unreal, or just purely Unreal?
I'm not entirely sure. I think at some point I want to. I was talking with Buxton actually a little bit about looking into HTTP requests in and out of Unreal, which there looks like they're. Yep. Yeah, they even have WebSockets available.
Yep.
So I think that there is some ideas for that. There's also some ideas that I'm kind of curious to start looking into using Unreal to host interactive projection map installations.
You know what? Whoa. What?
Yeah.
Okay, wait. Continue there, but I wanted to say what I was going to say. No, I forgot.
Robbie.
Well, it was about using Unreal and webs. Okay, I got it. So use Unreal, and you say open up a website like we usually do, right?
Yep.
And we use WebSockets to display some more game content that is 3D on the web.
Yeah, dude, those 3JS files, bro.
You know, have you seen those video games where you use your phone as a controller for the game on your computer?
No, I haven't.
That's a possibility. That's what I wanted to do for my thesis. But if we weren't going to use headsets, I wanted to use your phone and either project it or use it on TV.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that that's kind of like what I'm really excited about is like we're getting to a point where there's enough sort of crosstalk between developers so that there are these tools that we can use to create these connection points.
How about another question?
Shoot.
How about we make a controller? Your phone is a controller for the Steam or for the computer game. So you don't have to use a keyboard and mouse if you're not good with keyboard and mouse games. We can build an intuitive interface to controller.
Yeah, dude. And that's what I'm saying. Like imagine going to a walkthrough or a immersive installation.
Yeah. You're saying using Unreal for those situations and projecting content?
Yeah, totally. Because if you think about it, if you're using some sort of graphics computer that has the capability to push out 4K, send that to a projector, right? And then at the same token, that computer can run Unreal super easy. And if we have these WebSockets and these sort of like HTTP access points, now you're going to a location and you can interact with that thing. But now we're also doing it in a video game surface. So there can be sort of the interactions that you get with video games as well.
I'd say there isn't too much video games that do that. And if there are, there's probably at most 10 companies in the world that are doing that.
Totally.
Maybe 100. We'll say 100.
Yeah.
Well, that's not that many.
What's kind of interesting about that is like, I don't know the full details because they didn't really give a lot of full details, but I was watching this documentary on the Disney Plus about some of the stuff that they were doing in the Star Wars, the new Star Wars exhibit. And they were totally using Unreal. I recognized it as soon as I saw it and I was like, oh.
Did you know I applied for their ILM stagecraft or whatever?
Oh, that's dope.
Program, apprenticeship.
That's so dope.
But I never heard back. I don't think they're interested.
Honestly, man, Industrial Light and Magic is top bar.
That's where the guy Adam Savage from Mythbusters worked at. You have to be on that level.
Yep. Yeah, dude.
Maybe 20 years I could get there.
Yeah.
Really? Right?
Yeah. I think you could. And two, honestly, I'm really interested in just kind of doing it ourselves. Like, I think that we have enough. I mean, of course, maybe not to their caliber. But
we can get there if we have the resources.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm excited for, is just keeping and developing with these really intuitive and sort of off the wall ways of creating immersive experiences. All right, guys, thank you so much for sitting through and listening to Robbie and I talk about crazy things. And next time I'll be sitting down with Ryan Buxton, who is a partner on this project, and we'll be sitting down talking about crazy code. See you next time.
Peace.
Peace.